Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure for us to be today here on this session of the Frankfurt Book Fair. Today, I'm accompanying the author Daniel Álvarez Dalvareze as his pen name in this amazing explanation of his most recent work, The Chronics of the Verbedíns. Hi, Dalvareze, how are you?
Hi. I'm doing really fine. I'm excited. I wake up early to be and to have the pleasure to be sharing this time with you, and to be in the Frankfurt Book Fair. We've heard of it so many times, and just be able to be there, even though is through these screens that we are used now to use, but it's a huge pleasure. It's gonna be so weird talking to you in English after we've talking so many times. We talked so many times in Spanish about this, but I think it's gonna be a great experience, and I hope for the people are seeing as well.
Okay, for the people who's joining us today, I want to present you formally Dalvareze. He's a Venezuelan author that's been living in Colombia for the past few years. He has written a lot of books, both technical on his practical job, and also he's delved into fantasy realm with some middle grade and young adult text. Recently, he actually published the second part of the Verbedíns saga, the second installment of this series that hopes to be really long, if I'm not mistaken. He's also written books for a younger audience, his first sci-fi trilogy, which I also advise you to take a look at it. That is the Mushroom Galaxy. It's very interesting. Yep. But before we start all of this process, I would like to have a little bit better idea of how Dalvareze delved into the world of the writing, the literature and the writing text. So how has your experience been? Why did you decide to become an author, and why did you decide to become an author of fantasy and of YA or middle grade fantasy?
Yeah, well, I usually tell this as a joke, but it's not. I started writing, serious writing, in the fantasy world and all this after 2 years of psychological therapy. And then when I finished that, I told my doctor that the thing that I loved the most, and it was telling stories. And behind that, it was creating new stuff. I love creating things. It could be a new game, it could be a new book. I'm a software developer, so every day of my job I'm creating. Even the tiniest script is for me something new. So I'm really driven to create new stuff. And I think when you have, or when you want to let your imagination go, the book is the perfect medium to do it, because, well, it's a lot easier to say, rather than, I don't know, making a movie or making a whole series or animated, or even a video game is really a job that takes a lot of work. And I think you can go into a blank page and start creating whatever you want, and you have no limits whatsoever. And in the page, in what you really need to tell. So I love that about books. Lord of the Rings was written maybe in the 30s and then published in the 50s, and then maybe 2001 was when movies were prepared to tell us that amazing story. So I love books. I love telling stories, and I love fantasy. And the reason I went into psychological therapy, I don't want to sound too dramatic, but it's been a little hard in the last 20 years to grow in Venezuela, to live in. So I wanted to go as far as possible from reality. Even though the stories I tell, I wanted to be real human and really down to earth, and deal with real people problems. But I wanted to be in fantasy. I wanted to be science fiction, and of course, and I'm a huge fan of it. So when you're a fan, the first things that comes into mind is I want to write whatever someone else has inspired me to write. So I think that's why I really enjoy it. It's been a long journey. It's been a difficult journey, but it's been a wonderful journey. So I'm really happy to have made that decision and to have now many books to come and many books printed already.
Yeah, that's amazing. Actually, our life experience is what shapes us and what gives us the inspiration to move on and to achieve better goals. And that's what we can see in both of your texts. Now, we already know how Dalvareze got to the written word, how literature called, and you said like, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to throw the dice and see what the result is. But how do you get to actually writing about Verbedíns, about these saga that's right now have published both like the first and the second part, and that hopefully would get much more on the realms because there's so much more to say about it, so much more about the characters, about the world. So how do you got to that idea? What elements do you gather from, or which help do you get to achieve this amazing piece?
Well, as soon as I realized I wanted to tell a story, I said, well, I'm gonna tell a story about in a fantasy world, and I decided then that I wanted a book for non-fantasy readers. Right? I mean, this is not a book where you're gonna find the thing that I love. I mean, about dragons and swords and big wars, and that's amazing. And that's what took me into fantasy so much. But I wanted this to be a starting point for someone that hasn't read any fantasy in their life. And as well, if you are a fan of fantasy, you can find the same things that we need here: the magical, the objects, the characters, the conflicts that we expect to find in a book, in a 4-book saga, right? So we need that. So I remember I had this vague idea about it, and I wrote the first chapter because when you don't know nothing about writing, that's the first thing you do. You start writing your book, and then I wrote that first book, this first chapter, and then I show it to my dad. And I remember he saying to me, "What is your goal with this?" I said, "No, I just want you to go, want to go to the next chapter." I said, "Well, if that's the case, no, you're not there yet. So I don't want to keep reading this." So I say, "Well, as soon as you start going and learning and trying to follow the steps of your idols, you understand that when you are creating fantasy and sci-fi worlds, you need help. You need help, and you need help from anyone that can be probably a like-minded person, or you need help from someone who could be a reader of the story. You need help." So then I went to get help. I started to writing another story to understand what made readers turn the pages, and that's another story. But then I went into my niece. She was 12 at the moment, and I believe that Verbedíns, that was the target of the age. So and then I just started asking, what should I write about? I said, you should write about 2 brothers, and they should be a girl and a guy, and they should be called Daniela, and they should be called Andres or Andrew. And okay, and what else? And they should have a wonderful uncle. And I said, of course, I have a wonderful uncle in the story. So I just use her as a resource to start this thing going. So when she gave me the characters, when she described them to me, where she wanted to go, I just went. Something clicked on my mind, and then I tried to work on the conflict, on the world, on the things that motivates the characters to move forward. So I created this ink war, is that how we call it, and this and all these motivations to really achieve something. And when you have to, and you want something to achieve in a story, and especially in a fantasy story, you start having these different groups that collide each other in order to get it first from the other. So I think I went for the ideal reader. I think I went for what I wanted to tell and to whom I wanted to tell it to. So that's how I got started. Then it's a ton of work. It was 7 years for me before the first book was published, and it's been amazing. So I think it was thank to my niece about just giving me the spark, the right spark to move forward.
Well, I really like that idea of the fact that your base for the books are who wants to read it, who is targeted to, who is going to enjoy it, but it's not like absolute. Like I'm not 12 years old, obviously.
Me neither.
And still, when I had the chance to read it, I was hooked on the story. I was hooked on the characters. I actually found myself fighting alongside with them. And I would like the readers and the people who's following us to know a little bit more about the story from its maker. So how would you describe the story in Verbedíns as long, like the first part, because obviously we cannot do spoilers or go forward, but what is the main core of the story of Verbedíns? How would you present it to a person who has no idea what this is, what is it about, apart from the fact that it's a fantasy for high middle grade or YA?
Yeah, once I realized that my niece was the ideal reader of this, then I started to think about what did I want to say to her. I mean, she was 12 years old. It was at the very beginning, or where we make our worst mistakes in life, in all the teenage years. And what's the things you want to say that I wanted to say to her? And I thought, and I said, in my house for many years, I'm the youngest of my brothers, and the one that's closest to me is 10 years older than me. So in my house, it was very important. Everything about knowledge, to know things. I started reading, history books, biographies, or of these amazing characters that were real, that existed in this. And then I realized, and then I discovered Sherlock Holmes, and I discovered really all in my life for what I should wanted to. So when I read Sherlock Holmes, I knew that fantasy was a thing. Fantasy was real, because the main or the more magical thing about Sherlock Holmes is Sherlock himself. I mean, this thing doesn't exist. I mean, he doesn't exist in reality. So if you can create that, you can create whatever you want. So I started digging into the fantasy world, and I realized something that is not me that said it, but I know that now I live by imagination is more important than knowledge. I know that. And I didn't say that, and because we're in Frankfurt, I need to say that Albert Einstein was the one who said it, because he said that logic per se can take us from point A to point B, but imagination can take us anywhere. And I believe that's the real power. So I wanted to tell my niece and every single teenager in the world that you have to reach for imagination if you want to break the world that is surrounding you. I mean, the world that is surrounding you is a small world. We have a bigger world all the time. So we wanna go and grab whatever we need, whatever we want, whatever we desire for ourselves. And I think through imagination is the way we're gonna get to that. Is the right path to it, or at least is the fastest path to it. So Verbedíns, the word itself, it comes from a Flemish word, which is verbelding. I'm sorry for butchering the term, but I know it was right that way, and it translates to imagination. And then I said, well, we in Latin American and Spanish, we're not going to understand what verbelding means or whatever you said. So I started to working on the word for making our own. But what it means is imagination. So in the core of the story is how imagination can move us forward to the world that we want. Of course, to make it a little bit more fun and to make it a little bit more page turner, these guys through imagination achieve some amazing superpowers. I mean, they can control things with their minds. They can run really fast. They can feel whatever the other person is feeling. They can predict a little bit of the future. I mean, they can do a lot of stuff through imagination, right? We probably don't know how imagination would take us to move things with our mind, But what I like about fantasy is you can use fantasy to illustrate a point even further than you can do with a real message. I mean, you can control things through your mind if you use your imagination. That's a real statement. That's what I wanted to do. So I think people who like creativity, imagination, will love Verbedíns because is the core center of everything. And we have a difficult relationship as we are getting older too, with creativity and with imagination. So we start thinking, no, I'm not creative at all. I'm not imaginative at all. But some we all were kids, and all kids are, absolutely creative, and their imagination goes beyond whatever we can think. So if we can go back and remember how that was like, I think we can move forward as an adult who grabs and takes the imagination as a real path to life. And that's why I think we enjoy it. I'm not a teenager either, and I enjoy right. I wrote it, so I really clearly enjoy it. And all my friends and my closest friends are nowhere near teenagers years now, and I think they like that. I think they like the way that connects them with whatever they felt when they were kids and they were reading fantasy. In our time, it was the Never-Ending Story, and Sherlock Holmes, and Lord of the Rings, and all this stuff that take you anywhere, as Albert Einstein said.
So that what you said gives me one huge idea of the heart behind the words in Verbedíns. But now, how can that transcend when you see the character? So we do have the two, the siblings on the story, as your niece kindly provide us with, but Daniela and Andres, who are just your average teenagers on their path to school. They live with their parents and so forth, but suddenly something happens and their world just crashed down, and they have to shift their lives to live with this amazing uncle, very incredible uncle, that provides them with many tools, but also leaves them a lot of mysteries that just break loose on the moment in which his uncle, the uncle disappears, no trace left. And they have to start rebuilding all this knowledge they gather throughout the years from their parents, from their family, from their heritage, to understand that they go beyond that. And that part of magic that is the center of their family life, because they belong to this kind of society, secret society, who has a purpose in the world, not just in life, not just in their town, but in the world. And through that, they also have the chance to start understanding and seeing the world from a different perspective. As you said, gathering that part of imagination that we are all taught when we're little, there's fairies, there's magicians, there's a lot of things, but there's way more. And there's also a responsibility from you to protect and to save the world. And also we follow another story, another path, which is more mysterious even, because it's in this kind of hidden location where we have this kind of warrior, training school in which these teenagers also go and they have to achieve something. And part of the book the first book talks about how they have to get this test to prove themselves to get to the next rank on this system. And we find those two paths, one on the present world, real world, and we have computers, we have many things, and that kind of more fantastic world. Why do we follow these two paths on this story? Why separate them? Because this is just starting this world. This is just two parts of an amazing, huge world that later on the second part provide us three more of these possible societies and these possible groups of people that would going to build the complete world of Verbedíns. But why do we start with these two? Why do we get that glimpse and not just in some other stories, you get the whole picture right away and you can start building from there?
Yeah, I think there's a two or maybe a three parts answers to that question, and I want to start with the first one, and with the role of the uncle in the story. The uncle, as you said, is an amazing character. We're going to find out throughout the history that his involvement in the ink work is one of the main characters that we have now. This is a war who has that has been going on secretly in our world for over 500 years, and that's something that goes beyond these two teenagers that are trying to go to school, like you said, right? And I think when we're talking to teenagers, you life is hard, and that's why we struggle so much when we are teenagers, because we are told that we need to climb that mountain and we have to get to the top, and the only thing that we can see is how far it is, and how hard it's going to be to climb that high. But I think if we're told that we need to go to the next 2 meters of the path, that doesn't seem too hard to do. So we need to go step by step. So the uncle take this decision, because if he tells them you have to be part of this war that has been over 500 years, and they had people that can control fire on it, I will say no, thank you. I will go the other way, the exact other way. So the motivation for the characters to move forward is really a family matter. They need to find their uncle because it's the only family they have left. So they are going to move forward, no doubt about it. But how are they going to move forward? I think they're going to move forward if they know little by little, and the uncle knew that. So he will give all the crumbs so they can go step by step, moving forward to whatever he knows is their destiny. And I think Verbedíns, the saga, the book, the history is built the same way. I can tell you about a story, a war, about, I can give you, I don't know, probably 200,000 words about 500 of war going on, and I have that on the research. But I think you have to break any prejudices that you can have towards fantasy, towards story, towards a guy that controls fire, because some people, I say, no, that if there's guys that control fires, I don't like the story. And you don't know that. You don't know how far the mountain is, even though you see it over there. But you have to walk the path. And I think I wanted to hold the hand of the reader and try to understand this little by little as the main characters are doing it, right? So, and then the end is clear. And I think for the reader, for the fantasy reader, they're going to be in the middle of the ink war. So I think the main thing about the saga, the whole story, is the war, is the ink war. So we need to take part in the war, because it's false that you say I would not take any part on the war, because we do. If there is a conflict that affects our lives, we're going to take a part, even though we think we're taking a passive part, we are taking it. So I created these inks, which I decided to call, and I think the story, because why they call inks is really cool, because when they first started to fight for obtaining this supposedly magical thing that gives you any power that you want in the world, they started to write these letters between each other. And in order to disguise the message and whatever the plans were, they were using some special inks. And when you apply fire to it, it will take some other color and it will reveal the real message. So the first two inks that started the whole conflict, they used ink for the plan, and the other ones, as you said, in the second book, we got the chance to see many more. But I think there exist probably 20 inks that were in the war, and sometime in the history of the world, many of them keep living through the time where the book is told, and but these two principal inks were the ones that started the conflict, and that's why I decided that the first book is going to be, okay, which one are you? Are you this one? Are you that one? And of course, as you said, there's one that lives disguised in the real world, is the one that knows, which is Verbedíns, the ink Verbedín. They already know that imagination triggers something in our bodies, in our minds, in order to achieve something we never thought it was possible. But they decided that there was a knowledge worth telling, it was worth defending. So because they wanted to, they took on the huge responsibility of defend the war from the people who took imagination in the wrong direction. And then I think you have, and we have been told, and I think we have seen, and we have witnessed a this secret society that go for power, and and power as we know it, as human, as flawed as we are, but as we know it in a political matter, in an economical matter, in a religious matter, in a sports matter, in these influences that we have on a daily basis, and that's why they create this kind of filters. Because I believe something, that's the third part of the question, is I take a deep interest, and I took a lot of time to describe both learning systems that are coming in play. So Verbedíns, in this fictional town, where they go to a school which I wish it was my school, because you get to choose whatever you're gonna study, and you can't choose because it's easy, because it's not. You have to trial, and you have to to be up to the task, and you have to demonstrate that you really want to learn that in order to get into the class. And I think that's a wonderful way of learning, because people who want to learn mathematics, it should learn it, but people who want to learn dance, it should learn it as well. And the other one, I think, is more of a telling of how I see this educational system that we have throughout the world, that through test we decide which one is better and which one is not. And that's fine. I'm saying tests are bad, but in a system that it gives mathematics and linguistics a more important, or a more main stream importance, I believe that's not the case. So we need to give the kids any possibility. So one kind of people will go out of this system, one kind of people will go out of the system. So, and the first book is that, which team am I? I mean, am I this kind of person? Am I this kind of person? Because you're gonna realize really soon in the book that none of that are good or bad as a whole. I mean, we have bad people in Verbedíns in ink, and we have good people in Sing ink, and vice versa. So I think the ink doesn't define what kind of people you are, but the way you want to live life. So if you want to live life not as a Verbedín and not as a sin, or as a sin, you can go to the second book and have many other inks to realize. And I have an ink, it's called Punjabi, which they don't take part. They say they don't take part on the war, but they are really good storytellers. They can be seen as an illusionist, actually, because they use shadows to tell the stories. They use magnetics, and they use these spectacular shows to tell you the story about the war, because they think if they tell the story about the war, maybe they won't be able to stop it, but I think they will be able to let us learn whatever they did wrong in order to move forward to a final resolution. But they take it apart, even though they don't want to kill somebody else. But they decided, as journalists, as writers do, to tell the story we're seeing. I mean, I want to tell stories about what I witnessed in Venezuela, of course, and I think that's a part of the story. Even though I don't go to the street and in killing someone, but I think everybody takes a part. And these two main inks are the start of the conflict. And I think people who want to go into this saga need to know them very well.
Okay, that's a huge, good explanation, of how many possibilities the world that you created actually gives the reader, gives the person who actually takes the book and live through it. Because that's an experience that you have to, it's impossible to avoid when you start reading the books. You get sucked in that world, and you have to decide, and you have to, I don't know, I wouldn't say take a part or take a side, but I would say you start feeling things for the characters and start rooting for the characters, or hoping something happened to the other one so things can advance. And that's
and that something happens. And sorry to interrupt, but people write me about it. It's like, oh, I'm totally this team, and you should keep that one. And like they get really emotional because sometimes someone that's supposed to be bad is really good, and you love it, and you want to root for it, and they do. And I think that's an effect that I haven't planned beforehand, but people are taking side because I think it's a human nature to choose whatever path we need to go in life.
Yeah. You talk a little bit about the concept of war, of the different kind of factions that we have in this world, and that as in the real world, it actually looks for power, a specific kind of power. But if a person that has not approached Verbedíns asks you, is this the typical world of either the fantastic worlds, or is it a typical world that we see every day? What would you answer? Why is this word different, or what is the target, the original idea behind that word, and why do you put it? And before you answer, I want to thank all the people who's actually being here with us. We have some questions that some of the viewers are posing, and I wanted to grab one, but as soon as you finish, I would like to integrate that with another question that I have for you in the further part of it. Obviously, you can put any questions that you have, any comments that you want for the author or about the books. You can go ahead and put it on the chats on either of the platforms. We're very welcome to answer for them. So tell us about that war, Dalvareze.
Yeah, I think that it's more of a cold war per se, because in a real war, in an epic world, you're going through maybe some country, terrain, a castle or whatever that is really visible. I know it's there, and in order for me to get there, there's people who I have to remove to say something. But in this case, this war is an object that no one has seen, that many people believe that is true, that exists, but no one has seen it. So nobody knows where it is. So this is a war that you don't have to kill the enemy in order to win. So there's a lot of secrecy in whatever I'm doing to obtain that object. So it's a wonderful war because you don't expect anywhere for the enemy to come, and the enemy is always there. So I believe that's wonderful for the story because it gives you mystery. So I'm going to do that, but I couldn't. Why I couldn't? Who came before me? Who knew that before me? So that raises a lot of questions that makes you want to know what happened, and it makes you, like prepare and surprise yourself because you don't see the enemy coming. Never. So you know what they want. You know you want it too. And I think that's a cool kind of war. I love a big battle. I love a big battle scene. I love them. I really do. I play games just because I want to live them. But I believe Verbedíns is another kind of war because it's a war that we fight with ourselves, with life, and whatever hand we are dealt, whenever or whatever we are born. So a secret war that everybody is fighting every single day of their life is a war that I wanted to portray in this story. Even though there are battles, there are fights, there are superpowers colliding each other, and of course a lot of bad news about the main characters. And I think, well, I can say anything about it, right? But. Yeah. But I think that's the kind of war they can expect. I mean, the secret war because nobody knows what they're doing actually, and that makes them I don't know, a weird war. But I found one to watch and to read about.
Okay, that's something that it touched fiber inside about what's going on. One thing that most of fantasy, especially in the few past years, have come to acknowledge is the fact that diversity has always been put aside from fantasy. You always have like these stereotypes of characters, which normally are European style, like blonde, or that fall under certain categories or certain races of creatures that come from the myth and the lore from the European countries. But here in Verbedíns, we find a huge mash of different cultures, of different backgrounds, even the acceptance and the inclusion of people who has other types of diversity. We have handicaps, we have sexual diversity, we have many, many elements that give this story as a whole that integration and that acceptance feeling. Was that on purpose? Why did you include it? For example, in the case of the sibling's best friend, who is actually in a wheelchair, and he becomes a huge element and a huge character in the plot, in the general plot, and we have them and we can relate with him in so many levels. Why did you decide to do this? Taking into account that in fantasy, sometimes that's like fighting in a wheelchair in the middle of a fantastic world with powers going aside, kind of clashes our idea of fantasy, because as someone said, sometimes imagination and sometimes fantasy wants to take us out of our common world. Like when we read, most of the time we want to escape a little bit of what's going on in the world. So is this not a wink to we never escape our fantasy, we never escape in fantasy or world, or what was the purpose in that?
Yeah, I'm going to start for the last part. I really don't think that a good fantasy story can escape reality. If you tell a pure fantasy world, and I mean, you have to go to a common ground in order to tell a good story. I was telling you yesterday in a talk we were making that I can say that you and I are Wuklulus. And Wuklulus are persons that are born from the same parents. Oh, they're brothers. So why don't say they're brothers? Because that it will help you move this story. So I think a good story is going to be a base ground, or it's going to be grounded in something that makes us human and real. And I don't think we can really tell the story about an elf or a dwarf without making it real human, because we don't know how to be a dwarf or how to be an elf. So I think that's important. We can never escape that. And I'm a really optimistic person. I'm a really a person who wants to see the bright side of everything. And I think there's a problem with Latin Americans that we as a region are too young. And we have been, borrowing these cultures from, North, and we've seen the whatever people in the US are dressing, and we were conquered by the Spanish. And I think we have this lack of our own real culture. And I mean, not because we don't have it, we do have it, but we haven't made the same effort as other part of the world to tell it, to tell stories around it. And even though there's a lot of it, and Verbedíns is, I think, one of that. But when you lack something, I think that's something that liberates you, and you start looking for it anywhere else, and you're free from it. And being from a country that has suffered a lot, I have taken the liberty to say, well, I'm going to be a citizen of the world. So if I'm a citizen of the world, and I'm going to create a school, I don't want to create a school as the one I grew in and I studied, not because I didn't like it, I loved it, but I don't want that system to be. So I want to create a system that doesn't exist and put it on a town that is as beautiful as we imagine Switzerland to be. And I want the person to be, the same one of my favorite character from the Goonies, and that's a movie from the United States. So if I'm from Latin America, if I'm a citizen of the world, I can grab whatever I want to tell the story in order to convey a message. So the reason that you see this mesh of things going on in this reality, and the reality that the people in a wheelchair, the kind of life that they have, because it doesn't mean it has to be anywhere but wonderful. So I think what I wanted to tell is whatever I've seen in the world and whatever I thought it was useful to it. And if you're going to use your imagination, and if you're in a wheelchair, I think is a great example of whatever we can achieve. Even though I'm not saying, of course, through imagination I can walk again, but I'm saying that there's no limits, but whatever you put yourself upon. So I don't know. That's why I think I said, okay, I was born in Venezuela. I had the greatest luck to come here and to live in Colombia for the past 3 years. And I've lived in the US. I know Europe. And I said, why can't I take whatever I want? So I did. And I hope that makes the story goes and relate to everybody in everyone in the world, because that's one of the main goals here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as you mentioned, I think diversity is something that it's inherent in our culture as Latin American people, because we live that life of gathering pieces from different type of sources, and even the way the characters react with each other, I think underneath, even though they might look like European or they might look like American, they have in their hearts the same desire of keeping their family, their friends, and their loved ones as we Latin American people do. We need family because that's the core of our existence here, and that's what we look for on the characters in the book. That's what thrives on the whole of the story, how they need to save this main element in their lives. And also, I wanted to de-emphasize on the part of representation, because I do think that some people in some of the usual countries in the United States and in some of the European countries are starting to realize that readers are not just your perfect style of people. We have readers who have different types of issues, different types of backgrounds, different types of lives. And that's what we can actually hook on the characters, like synchronize our hearts with them and see if I don't know, if I have a terrible past because I come from a country with a war or some kind of situation, if I see a character with those characteristics in the book that goes through the same things that I went through, I do believe on that story, even though it talks about magic, it talks about, creatures and stuff that do not exist. So that's one of the plus in Verbedíns, and that's one of the things that if you delve into this story, be sure that you're going to find a character that you are going to love, that you're going to feel for, and that you're going to root for, because the world is so huge and we don't know it all. And this is one excellent way of seeing it. Now, you mentioned something that I think this space is excellent for it, and it's the fact that you're an author from Latin America. You're an author from a place in the world that usually doesn't delve into their past or use their lore to create that fantasy as a genre of writing. It's not so worked on because, well, we live in a different interest world. We don't have that desire, or they don't teach us at school to actually value what we have or create new things, because we're kind of more raw if you see most of the text. So how does it feel to be a Latin American author writing about something that might be a little bit far from the traditional kind of text? And how does it feel being part of independent publishing? Because those two things here are a huge context, so different from any other.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this before, and I think I'm going to relay that subject into I remember you and I talking about they translate Verbedíns into German, into I don't know, Italian, French, English, or whatever, and I remember saying, and we agreed on that. I don't know, some kind of a speech that we need the same opportunity. We are people who are creating that. And I believe that's true. I mean, and somebody had to buy the first Spanish version of Lord of the Rings. And somebody bought the first Harry Potter in Colombia in order to that story to achieve that amount of fandom and reach. But now I think that Verbedíns should be translated because it's a good story. And I think when you and everything and everyone you mentioned, I mean, a independent publisher, a writer, whatever he's from, a bookstagrammer, a booktuber, an editor, whoever is involved in this, little world that we call books, we are in the same business of conveying a real good message to everyone in the world. If you have a good story are meant to be shared. It doesn't matter in what language. And if we, as publisher, and I'm taking part of it because I'm one of the key in the change, as everyone else is, are in the making of telling good stories. I think we have to go ahead and try to tell it in many languages as we can, because I can read a book in English. Maybe I get sometimes a book in Portuguese, and I can understand whatever they're saying a little bit but when you read something, and that's why I decided even to write in Spanish, not because I can write in English. Probably Verbedíns will take me 10 years more to write it in English, but I could think I could do it. But the message, what is really important about a good story, it needs to be told in your mother language and needs to be read in your mother language. And I believe people who are gonna read Verbedíns, it should read it in German if they speak German as their mother language, because I think when you read it in the same way, you learn how to express yourself for the first time in the world. I think you're going to take that story deeply into your heart. And if you take that story deeply into your heart, the message has been conveyed. The main objective of a publisher, whatever it is, it has been achieved. So I believe that if I'm a writer and I have something to say, and a publisher thinks it's a good story, it's a great start. I mean, this fair is about that. It's about finding stories that are worth telling. And I think in this world of collaboration that we know now, we don't have these islands, and Germany is a country that nobody knows about. We are connected all the time. So I don't think any publisher in the world gets a script and says, "Wow, that's a horrible story. I'm going to print it." It's not. That doesn't happen. I mean, maybe this nowadays there's a lot of editorial services that you think they're publishers, or we authors as a newbie, as new in this world. I think it's those are not publishers. But if a fellow publisher from other country thought that was a good story, you as a publisher have the responsibility to tell the story, to give the German people the pleasure of reading a good story, even though it was produced or not in your country. We have that to ourselves. So I think it doesn't matter if you're independent, it doesn't matter if you're big, if you're anywhere in the world, or if you're writing in any language. If your message is good, it should reach the entire world.
Yeah, I totally agree. And now this time is perfect because he's allowing us to transcend all the borders, all the distances, and having these possibilities in our hands or digitally in your different devices, so you can take a look at this world, not only Verbedíns, but so many words that are out there that maybe we did not reach to because they're too far. Now, we're getting to a close to this amazing presentation. I want to thank Dalvareze for this. This is an amazing story that I recommend everyone that is right now accompanying us and that join us throughout the presentation. This is a story, not only it's targeted for young adults, it's targeted to a younger audience, but you can, as a grown-up, actually read
younger
it.
like us.
And you can enjoy it, and you can have so much more. And as Dalvareze said, it's imagination, what thrives in our lives and what should leads us to be better people. So thank you for giving us this space to the Frankfurt Book Fair. We have both of the books. If you're interested, please follow Calixta Editores in their website, in their social media, in Instagram and Facebook, in YouTube. Follow Dalvareze also in his social media. Pay attention to what Calixta Editores from Colombia has to bring, because supporting local authors, as Dalvareze, he's already Colombian.
Thank you.
They are supporting also different types of stories and different views of the world that would actually give and provide everyone who read it a great hold and great possibilities. So thank you so much for everyone watching us. We hope to be back next year and to do much more. Please follow us and have a great